Billionaire CEO came home to find his pregnant wife weeping while his mother laughed, but what happened next will leave you speechless. Please, just leave me alone. The desperate cry echoed through the marble hallway as Marcus Wellington stepped through the front door of his Beverly Hills mansion. He wasn't supposed to be back from Tokyo for another 3 days, but something had pulled him home early. Call it intuition, call it love. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button if you're enjoying this tale, subscribe for more amazing family stories, and share this with your friends who love dramatic twists. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on what you think is really happening here. Marcus Wellington was living what most would call the perfect life, a tech empire worth billions, a stunning mansion overlooking the Pacific, and a beautiful wife carrying his first child. Until this moment, he believed his biggest challenge was choosing between the Maserati or the Tesla for his morning commute. The sound of sobbing grew louder as he moved toward the living room, his Italian leather shoes silent against the Persian rugs. What he saw there made his blood run cold. His wife, Isabella, sat curled on their cream-colored sofa, her hands protectively cradling her 6-month pregnant belly. Tears streamed down her face, her usually perfect makeup smeared and running. Her dark hair, normally styled to perfection, hung in disheveled waves around her shoulders. But it wasn't just Isabella's distress that stopped Marcus in his tracks, it was his mother's reaction. Eleanor Wellington stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silver hair pulled back in its signature chignon, wearing one of her tailored Chanel suits. And she was laughing. Not a gentle chuckle or nervous giggle, but a cold, almost cruel sound that seemed to bounce off the walls like shards of ice. "Mother, what the hell is going on here?" Marcus's voice cut through the tension like a blade. His jaw clenched as he took in the scene, his fragile, pregnant wife in obvious distress, and his mother seemingly finding entertainment in her pain. Eleanor's laughter died abruptly. She turned to face her son, her steel-gray eyes meeting his with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Marcus, darling, you're home early. How was Tokyo?" "Don't you dare deflect," he snapped, moving immediately to Isabella's side. He knelt beside the sofa, his large hands gently taking hers. "Bella, sweetheart, what happened? What did she do to you?" Isabella's sobs intensified at his touch. She looked up at him with those doe-like brown eyes that had captured his heart 3 years ago at a charity gala. "Oh, Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't, she'll only make it worse if I tell you." The fear in her voice ignited something primal in Marcus. He'd built his empire by protecting what mattered most, and nothing mattered more than the woman carrying his child. He stood slowly, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow over his mother. "What did you say to her?" His voice was dangerously quiet, the same tone he used in boardrooms when someone had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Eleanor's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched slightly. "I simply asked her about her doctor's appointment today." Apparently, that was too intrusive. "That's not true." Isabella's voice cracked as she struggled to speak through her tears. She questioned everything. The baby's health, my fitness as a mother, whether I was even taking proper care of myself. She made me feel like I was already failing our child before it's even born. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. His mother had always been protective of the family name and fortune, but this was crossing every line imaginable. Isabella was vulnerable, hormonal, carrying his heir, and Eleanor was treating her like some gold-digging interloper instead of his beloved wife. "Mother, I want you to leave. Now." The words came out steady, but the fury behind them was unmistakable. Eleanor's composure never wavered. "Marcus, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand." He moved to stand between his mother and wife, a human shield protecting what he held most dear. "Isabella is my wife, the mother of my child, and a member of this family. If you can't treat her with the respect she deserves, then you're not welcome in our home." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor studied her son's face, searching for any sign that he might reconsider. Finding none, she picked up her Hermes purse from the side table with deliberate precision. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying decades of disappointment. "But Marcus, sometimes the people we love most are the ones we see least clearly." As Eleanor's heels clicked across the marble toward the front door, Marcus turned back to Isabella. She had stopped crying but was watching him with an expression of such gratitude and love that it made his chest tight. "She's gone, sweetheart," he murmured, pulling her into his arms as carefully as he could manage with her growing belly between them. "I won't let anyone hurt you or our baby. Not even my own mother." Isabella melted into his embrace, her body finally relaxing for the first time since he'd walked through the door. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "I was so scared you wouldn't believe me." "I'll always believe you," he promised, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You're my world, Bella. Both of you are." But as he held his wife close, Marcus couldn't shake the image of his mother's face in those final moments, not angry or hurt as he'd expected, but something else entirely. Something that looked almost like pity. The following weeks passed in a strange, unsettling rhythm that Marcus couldn't quite shake. He'd made his choice, Isabella and their unborn child came first, always, but the aftermath of that decision began revealing itself in ways he hadn't anticipated. Eleanor had respected his wishes and stayed away from the mansion, though she continued to call his office daily. Marcus instructed his assistant to screen the calls, accepting only those related to urgent business matters. When they did speak, their conversations were clipped, professional, devoid of the warmth that had characterized their relationship for 34 years. Isabella, meanwhile, seemed to bloom in his mother's absence. The tears stopped, her appetite returned, and she began planning the nursery with an enthusiasm that warmed Marcus's heart. She'd chosen a soft yellow theme, they'd decided to keep the baby's gender a surprise. And spent hours online ordering organic cotton blankets, handcrafted wooden toys, and a rocking chair that cost more than most people's cars. "Look at this," she said one evening, curled up beside him on their king-sized bed, her laptop balanced on her growing belly. "It's a mobile with little elephants. The reviews say the music is so soothing." Marcus smiled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. Money is no object when it comes to our little one." But even as he said the words, a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered questions he didn't want to acknowledge. The voice sounded suspiciously like his mother's. The first real sign that something was amiss came 3 weeks after the confrontation. Marcus was reviewing quarterly reports in his home office when his head of security, James Morrison, knocked on the door. James had been with the Wellington family for over a decade, a former FBI agent whose discretion was absolute and whose instincts were rarely wrong. "Mr. Wellington, I need to discuss some irregularities with you," James said, his weathered face serious. "What kind of irregularities?" "Financial ones. There have been several large withdrawals from your personal accounts, amounts that don't match any purchases or investments I'm aware of. Additionally, some of Mrs. Wellington's jewelry has gone missing from the safe." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Missing? What do you mean missing?" "The diamond tennis bracelet you bought her for your anniversary, the emerald earrings from Tiffany, and her grandmother's pearl necklace. Mrs. Wellington reported them stolen last week, but the security footage shows no signs of forced entry or unauthorized access. The implications hung heavy in the air between them." Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, trying to process what James was telling him. "Have you spoken to Isabella about this?" "I tried, sir, but she became quite upset. She suggested that perhaps your mother had taken them out of spite, given the recent tension in the family." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mother was many things, controlling, opinionated, sometimes ruthless in business, but she wasn't a thief. Eleanor Wellington had her own considerable wealth and had never shown interest in Isabella's jewelry before. "That's impossible," Marcus said firmly. "My mother would never." Sir, with respect, I'm not making accusations. I'm simply reporting facts. The jewelry is gone, the withdrawals are unexplained, and Mrs. Wellington seems to have theories about both. After James left, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring out at the city lights below. The rational part of his mind, the part that had built a tech empire from nothing, was screaming that something didn't add up. But every time he tried to follow that logic, he saw Isabella's tear-streaked face from that first day, heard the fear in her voice when she begged him not to confront his mother. That evening at dinner, he decided to approach the subject carefully. Isabella had prepared his favorite meal, or rather, their chef had prepared it under her supervision, and she looked radiant in a flowing maternity dress that accentuated her glowing skin. Bella, James mentioned some concerns about missing jewelry. Are you sure you've looked everywhere? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face, too quick for him to identify. Then her eyes filled with tears, and she set down her fork with trembling hands. I can't believe you're questioning me too, she whispered. First your mother treats me like a criminal, and now you think I'm lying about my own jewelry being stolen? No, sweetheart, that's not what I meant. She's poisoning you against me, Marcus. Even when she's not here, she's still winning. Isabella's voice broke on the last word, and she pressed her hands to her belly. The stress isn't good for the baby. Dr. Martinez said I need to stay calm, but how can I when even my own husband doesn't trust me? Marcus was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms, guilt washing over him like a tide. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Of course I trust you. I just want to understand what's happening so I can protect you better. She melted into his embrace, her tears soaking through his shirt. I'm scared, Marcus. What if she tries to take the baby away from us? What if she convinces you that I'm not good enough to be a Wellington? That will never happen, he promised fiercely. You are my wife, and this is our child. No one, not even my mother, will ever change that. But even as he comforted Isabella, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The financial discrepancies, the missing jewelry, the way Isabella always seemed to have an explanation that painted his mother as the villain, it was all too convenient, too neat. Later that night, as Isabella slept peacefully beside him, Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for weeks to come. He called James Morrison. I want you to install additional security cameras, he said quietly into the phone. Discreet ones. I need to know what's happening in my own home when I'm not here. Sir, are you sure? Mrs. Wellington might not appreciate. She doesn't need to know. And James? I want you to look into those financial withdrawals more carefully. Find out where that money went. As he hung up the phone, Marcus felt like he was betraying everyone he loved, his wife, his mother, maybe even himself. But something was wrong in his perfect life, and he was determined to find out what it was, no matter how much the truth might hurt. The baby kicked against Isabella's belly as she shifted in her sleep, and Marcus placed his hand gently over the movement. Whatever was happening, he would protect his child. Even if it meant protecting them from the people he loved most. The hidden cameras had been recording for exactly 1 week when James Morrison requested an urgent meeting. Marcus found himself pacing his office like a caged animal, dreading what his head of security might reveal. The past 7 days had been a masterclass in cognitive dissonance, watching Isabella glow with maternal happiness while simultaneously questioning everything he thought he knew about his wife. Sir, you need to see this, James said without preamble, setting up a laptop on Marcus's mahogany desk. I've compiled the most significant footage from this week. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee mug. Show me. The first clip began innocuously enough. Isabella, alone in their living room, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She looked serene, beautiful, every inch the perfect pregnant wife. But then her phone rang, and everything changed. Hello, darling, Isabella's voice was completely different, colder, more calculating than Marcus had ever heard it. She glanced around the room before continuing, yes, the plan is working perfectly. The old bat is completely out of the picture now. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. On screen, his wife, his pregnant, vulnerable wife, was smiling with a cruelty that made his mother's laughter seem warm by comparison. The jewelry is already sold, Isabella continued into the phone. Marcus is so blinded by his protective instincts that he doesn't question anything. And the financial transfers? He thinks his precious mother is trying to sabotage me. James paused the video. Sir, there's more. Much more. The next clip showed Isabella in their bedroom, standing before the open safe. With practiced efficiency, she removed several pieces of jewelry, including items Marcus distinctly remembered her claiming were stolen. She placed them in a small velvet bag, then picked up her phone again. It's me, she said to whoever was on the other end. I have the rest of the pieces. Yes, the emerald earrings too. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles went white. When was this taken? 2 days ago, sir. The same day she reported those very pieces missing to security. But the most damning footage was yet to come. In the final clip, Isabella sat in the nursery they'd been decorating together, surrounded by tiny yellow onesies and stuffed animals. She was on the phone again, but this time her conversation made Marcus's stomach lurch. The pregnancy is the perfect cover, she was saying, one hand absently rubbing her belly. Marcus is so desperate to be a good father that he'll do anything to protect me and the baby. Once the old woman is completely out of the picture, permanently, the entire fortune will be within reach. The word permanently hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt the room spinning around him. There's one more thing, sir, James said quietly. I had our financial team trace those withdrawals. The money is going to an account registered under a false name, but we've connected it to a man named Vincent Carrera. He has a record, fraud, extortion, and... James paused, clearly uncomfortable. And conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus stared at the frozen image of his wife on the laptop screen. This woman, who had shared his bed for 3 years, who carried his child, who had convinced him to turn against his own mother, she was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. She was a predator who had been systematically destroying his family from the inside. I need to confront her, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sir, I'd advise caution. If she's working with someone like Carrera. She's in my house, James. Carrying my child. I can't just. I need to know the truth. That evening, Marcus sat across from Isabella at dinner, studying her face as if seeing it for the first time. She was telling him about her day, a prenatal yoga class, lunch with friends, shopping for baby clothes. Every word felt like a lie now, every smile a manipulation. You seem quiet tonight, Isabella observed, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Is everything all right at work? The concern in her voice sounded so genuine that for a moment, Marcus almost doubted what he'd seen. Almost. Isabella, he said carefully, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Something flickered in her eyes. So brief he might have imagined it. Of course, darling. You can ask me anything. The missing jewelry. Are you absolutely certain you don't know what happened to it? Her face crumpled instantly, tears springing to her eyes with practiced ease. Marcus, how can you ask me that? After everything your mother put me through, after all the stress she caused, now you're accusing me of lying about being robbed? I'm not accusing you of anything. I just... You are. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. You're questioning me just like she did. She's turned you against me, Marcus. Even banished from this house, she's still poisoning your mind against your own wife. The performance was flawless, the trembling voice, the protective hand over her belly, the tears that seemed to come from genuine hurt. If Marcus hadn't seen the footage, he would have been on his knees apologizing within seconds. Instead, he stood slowly, his decision crystallizing. "You're right, sweetheart. I'm sorry. The stress of work is getting to me." Isabella's tears stopped as if controlled by a switch. "Really? Really? In fact, I think we both need a break. I'm going to take that business trip to London next week after all. Give us both some space to breathe." She smiled then, and Marcus saw it clearly now, the calculation behind her eyes, the satisfaction of a predator who believed her prey was still firmly in her trap. "That sounds perfect," she said, moving around the table to kiss his cheek. "A little time apart will be good for us." As she headed upstairs to prepare for bed, Marcus remained in the dining room, his mind racing. He wouldn't be going to London. Instead, he would be watching from the shadows, finally ready to see exactly what his wife did when she thought she was safe from observation. The baby she carried was still his child, still innocent in all of this. But the woman carrying that child? She was about to discover that Marcus Wellington hadn't built an empire by being naive. And he certainly hadn't survived in the cutthroat world of business by letting predators destroy his family. The game was about to change, and this time, Marcus would be the one controlling the rules. Marcus had never felt more like a stranger in his own home than he did crouched in the shadows of his study, watching security monitors as his wife prepared to destroy everything he held dear. 3 days had passed since he'd supposedly left for London, 3 days of watching Isabella transform from the grieving, vulnerable woman he thou. Ted with a phone call that made Marcus's blood run cold. Phase 1 complete, she'd laughed into the receiver. The old witch is completely isolated, and Marcus is so wrapped around my finger he'd probably help me bury the body. Now, on this 4th night, Marcus watched through the hidden cameras as Isabella prepared for what she clearly believed would be her final performance. She dressed carefully, not in the comfortable maternity clothes she usually wore around the house, but in a sleek black dress that somehow made her pregnancy look more like a prop than a natural condition. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 p.m., and Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched Isabella open the door to admit a man he'd never seen before. Vincent Carrera was exactly what Marcus had expected, mid-40s, expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his criminal edge, and eyes that missed nothing. "You look radiant," Vincent said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't place. "Pregnancy suits you, though I have to admit, I'll be glad when this charade is over." Isabella laughed, the sound nothing like the musical laughter that had charmed Marcus 3 years ago. "Soon enough. Once the old woman is dealt with permanently, we can drop the loving wife act entirely." They moved into the living room, the same room where Marcus had found Isabella crying that first day, where he'd chosen to believe her tears over his mother's warnings. Now he watched from his hidden position as his wife and her accomplice spread documents across the coffee table like generals planning a war. "The inheritance laws are clear," Vincent was saying, pointing to various papers. "Once Eleanor Wellington dies, and with Marcus so devoted to his pregnant wife, you'll have access to the entire family fortune. The business, the properties, the offshore accounts, everything. And you're certain the method will look natural?" Isabella asked, her hand absently stroking her belly in a gesture Marcus had once found endearing. "Heart attack brought on by stress. Very believable for a woman her age, especially given the recent family drama. The compound I've prepared is undetectable after 48 hours, and with her existing heart condition." Vincent shrugged. "It's perfect." Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. They weren't just talking about stealing from his family, they were planning to murder his mother. The woman who had tried to warn him, who had seen through Isabella's act from the very beginning. "What about Marcus?" Isabella asked. "He's been so protective lately, so suspicious. What if he starts asking questions after she dies?" Vincent's smile was predatory. "Grieving men make poor decisions. Especially when they're dealing with a new baby and a wife who's struggling with postpartum depression. Tragic, really, how many new mothers suffer from such severe mental health issues that they, well, let's just say accidents happen. The casual way he discussed murdering both Marcus and Isabella's unborn child, Marcus's child, sent a rage through him unlike anything he'd ever experienced. But he forced himself to remain still, to keep watching, to gather every piece of evidence he could. The baby complicates things, Isabella mused, and for a moment Marcus hoped she might show some maternal instinct, some line she wouldn't cross. Not really, Vincent replied. Infant mortality rates are higher than people think. And a grieving widower with a dead mother and dead wife? He'll be completely broken. Easy to manipulate, easy to control. We'll comfort him through his grief, help him make decisions about the business, and within a year, we'll have everything. Isabella nodded thoughtfully. And if he becomes too difficult to manage? Then he joins his family. Suicide brought on by overwhelming grief. It happens more often than you'd think. Marcus had heard enough. More than enough. He activated the recording function on his phone and stepped out of the shadows, his footsteps echoing in the marble hallway as he approached the living room. Fascinating conversation, he said, his voice cutting through their planning like a blade. Both Isabella and Vincent spun around, their faces cycling through shock, fear, and calculation in rapid succession. Isabella recovered first, her hand flying to her throat in a gesture of surprise that might have fooled him once. Marcus. You're supposed to be in London. You scared me half to death. Did I? Marcus stepped fully into the room, his phone still recording. Because from what I just heard, you're planning to scare my mother to death. Literally. Vincent was already moving, his hand reaching inside his jacket, but Marcus had anticipated this. James Morrison stepped out from behind the kitchen doorway, his service weapon drawn and trained on the other man. I wouldn't, James said calmly. FBI training dies hard. Isabella's mask finally slipped completely. The tears, the vulnerability, the loving concern, all of it vanished, replaced by cold fury. You have no idea what you've just done, Marcus. No idea what you're throwing away. I'm throwing away a murderer, Marcus replied. A woman who was planning to kill my mother, steal my fortune, and probably murder me and our child when we became inconvenient. Our child. Isabella laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Marcus, you sweet, naive man. There is no our child. The words hit him like a physical blow. What are you talking about? The pregnancy is real enough, she said, her hand moving to her belly in a gesture that now seemed obscene. But it's not yours. Vincent and I have been together for over a year. The baby is his. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Everything, the marriage, the pregnancy, the tears, the manipulation, all of it had been a lie from the very beginning. The timing worked out perfectly, Isabella continued, seeming to enjoy his pain. You were so desperate for an heir, so ready to believe in our perfect love story. It was almost too easy. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. James had called for backup the moment Marcus had given him the signal. As the police led Isabella and Vincent away in handcuffs, Marcus stood alone in his living room, surrounded by the wreckage of his life. His phone buzzed with a text message from his mother, I'm sorry, son. I wish I'd been wrong. He called her immediately, his hands shaking as he dialed. Mother, he said when she answered, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. You were trying to protect me, and I chose her over you. Eleanor's voice was gentle, filled with the love he'd been too blind to see. Oh, my darling boy. I never wanted to be right about this. I just wanted to keep you safe. Can you forgive me? Marcus asked, tears finally coming after days of numbness. There's nothing to forgive, Eleanor replied. You loved someone, and you protected what you thought was your family. That's what good men do. Now come home to your real family, and let me take care of you. As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that his mother's laughter that first day hadn't been cruel at all. She'd been laughing at Isabella's performance, seeing through the crocodile tears to the predator beneath. Eleanor Wellington had been protecting her son the only way she knew how, by refusing to be fooled by a master manipulator. The truth was finally clear: the pregnant wife had been the villain, and his mother had been the hero all along. Sometimes the people who challenge us most are actually protecting us from dangers we cannot see. True family love isn't always gentle, sometimes it's fierce, uncompromising, and willing to be misunderstood in service of a greater truth. Marcus learned that wisdom often wears the mask of criticism, and that the strongest bonds are forged not in easy agreement, but in the courage to stand firm when everything seems to be falling apart. Trust your instincts, cherish those who truly know you, and remember that real love sometimes says the hard things that need to be heard.